If we could reconvene, please. Thank you, everybody. We've got a great list of questions here. I'm just randomly going to walk through them. Some of them I think will be fairly easy to respond to. Others I may ask other commissioners to respond or ask if you have any comments to make. First, I'd like to suggest that if you would like a copy of this PowerPoint presentation, be happy to give it to you. Just contact Judy, not the PowerPoint itself, but a PDF version of it, okay? All right, so let's see this first question here. I won't read anybody's names, unless you'd like me to. So commercial building exists with T111 siding. So for siding replacement, would we be able to use T111 or vinyl in the historic district? Anybody like to respond to that?
Well, if it's a non-contributing building, sure.
Even vinyl?
Well, no. Well, I would say,
You would say that you would discourage it.
Yeah,
what you would say.
Yes, it would be discouraged.
And the reason being that there are so many other sheathings available that are of equal.
So
like hardy board would be appropriate.
if you have that as an issue, what I would suggest is, again, come talk to us on Tuesday morning. Say, hey, this is what I'm thinking about. One of the things we can do is we can help you figure out other materials of similar costs that would help you accomplish what you're trying to accomplish and also be compliant. So these Tuesday morning meetings are really informational. It's kind of like getting free design services.
I'd like to make a point on that. Yeah. Having been here for almost 8 years, I can say that one of the things that we've seen happen in the very recent times is we've been able to focus on the earlier times of applications, the earlier approaches to the commission. It used to be that you were kind of on your own and you submitted an application and it was passed on in writing, and you either were approved or denied, or you had to come to a hearing with very little interaction with the commission. And recently, the emphasis on starting off at an earlier stage and visiting during the review committee activities. So the review committee continues to pass, as John said, on the papers and the applications that are submitted. But much more importantly, added to that is the consultative meeting and talking about what you want to do with us so that we have an idea of what you want to do, and you perhaps get a refined idea of what is going to fly and not fly. There's a lot more emphasis on informality, a lot more emphasis on collegiality, and a lot more cooperation that I think you'll see over the next short period of time turn the view of the HPC from being one that has a lot of adversarial history with it to one that's much more cooperative now. So I'd like you to bear that in mind. It's a friendlier place than it may have been in the past.
Thanks, Jim. So we have large picture windows. If one should need to be replaced, could we use picture windows? Well, yes, because it already exists. Nobody is going to come and make you comply with the standards unless you're doing something to change it. So, for example, anything that's pre-existing, not an issue. The parking lot is asphalt. Remember I said that asphalt is generally not can it be replaced with blacktop? Well, that would be repair and maintenance. If it needs to be we would encourage you not to, and maybe even talk about some other alternatives that over their life cycle might actually cost you less. That's another reason to come talk to us on Tuesday, but there's nothing that would prohibit you from that repair and maintenance. Again, was one of the things that we talked about. Is there a cost fee for just being part of the historic district? No. If an improvement doesn't face the street, a back porch, is there still oversight over this? Anyone want to address that?
The answer is yes, there is. But again, when you think about streetscape, which is the view from the street, things that we consider in terms of the relative importance, obviously, if it doesn't show from the streetscape, it's not going to be subject to the same kinds of concerns. So yes, it's subject to review, subject to jurisdiction, but it isn't the same as if you're designing a front porch.
Is there a fee for a minor application? Yes, it's $100. What is the turnaround time for submitting a minor application and receiving a response? Often, if it's a compliance submission, you can receive, generally speaking, if you want it to be reviewed on a Tuesday morning, Judy, it needs to be in by the prior Tuesday or Wednesday? An application to come before us.
No, sometimes they get turned around within a few days, but technically you have a 45-day review.
Yeah. So generally, minor applications are, again, if they're compliant, are turned around within a day or two. They can just simply be approved at the review meeting. However, the more major ones, there's a 45-day limit to which you must receive a response from us by law.
I might also comment on the proportion of what we see in terms of the minor applications.
Well, that's the
versus
next question. Have you
versus the-
considered?
Oh, well, I'll answer.
Yeah. Have you considered how increased volume will affect the timing of this with this expansion?
Well, the answer is that the timing has actually improved a great deal. The more you can categorize things as minor applications, and the faster you process them, the faster the applications get through. Our ratio of doing minor applications and the meetings of the review committee average somewhere between 30 and 40 a month, if I'm remembering correctly. 30 to 40 would be sort of an accurate estimate, as opposed to maybe 5, 6, 7 hearings. So it's a ratio in which you can see most of the business is really being done in the minor applications, and they are being done much more quickly, even with the review meetings for non-approval stuff.
So is there a fee for a major application? Well, an application is either minor or it's a full application. Yes, it's a $500 fee, and that $500 fee is required for you to be able to come to the full public hearing. So if you're doing an addition or a new construction that does need to come before the full commission, that would be a non-minor or major application. What if a historically appropriate element like a door does not aesthetically fit with the very non-historic structure? Well, again, come to us on Tuesday morning and say, hey, this is what I'd like to put in the house. This is what the house looks like. We'll have a conversation with you about it, and we'll see if we can collectively come to something that we all agree would be appropriate. So again, we're trying to, as much as possible, work with folks.
Can I add?
Yeah,
to
go ahead,
that?
Kevin.
I was just going to say, if you have a fairly new house, and let's just say it's a standard type of a colonial construction, you want to put in a door, that would not necessarily be something you'd want to put a historically looking door in. You would want something that fits with that colonial structure, right? So that would likely have no problem with us. We would likely approve that fairly quickly. On the other hand, if, let's just say you have a contributing house, a 180 or 120-year-old house, and you want to put a very modern door in it, that would wind up then, most likely, we would say, no, that's not appropriate. A house of that age would probably have a wooden door. It would look something like this, and we would have examples.
And for those of you who've not spent a lot of time in this room, surrounding you are Cape May's, a number of Cape May's contributing structures. So if you want to gaze at them or look at them another time, you can see them. Those are considered some of our major considering.
So generally speaking, what the Secretary of Interior Standards asks of us is to, in a case like we just talked about, what would be appropriate for the time that structure was built? That's really the criteria. So it would be highly inappropriate to take a Victorian door and put it on a 1971 house. Fake history is not what we're after. So is the consideration for compliance with HPC standards if the proposal is passed retroactive? No. These application conditions only get triggered if you are making some sort of an improvement. That's the only criteria by which this affects you in any way. Hardy board versus wood. Which areas does this concern? Okay. I'm not quite sure I understand the context of the question, but if you were a contributing house, and there's a couple of questions here about contributing, non-contributing, so let's just clear that up real quick. What constitutes a contributing house? Well, we have, 800 different property surveys?
Oh, it's got to be greater than that.
More than that.
It's got to be.
So most every property in Cape May, over a period of time, and they keep cycling to update them, has been reviewed by an architectural historian and produces a report. If you want the report on your home, all you need to do is call or send an email to Judy. She will print it for you and give it to you. Hopefully, at some point, we'll be able to get those online and have an online access to them, but that's a huge task. In those property reports, it will state very, very clearly, are you a contributing house, a non-contributing house, or a key contributing house? There's a handful of those as well. And that report actually gives you the criteria by which that was made. And so there's not any overarching criteria because they're all individually assessed on a property-by-property basis. So, for example, if you're a contributing house, a hardy board would not be appropriate because it doesn't comply with our standards. If it's a non-contributing house, of course it would be just fine. Windows that are wood, can they be new in the historic district, or is refurbishment of existing windows mandatory? Again, if it's a non-contributing house, not an issue. Doesn't need to be wood. If it is a contributing house, our standards recommend that the first thing you do is see whether it can be repaired. We've been able to identify in the last year or so 3 different local contractors, because we can't recommend anybody, but we can give you a list of local contractors who are seeking work in terms of doing window repairs in a contributing house. If it's irreparable, so rotted that it simply can't function, then replacing it would be appropriate. In this case, it would need to be wood, with wood on the interior and the exterior, and the number of divided lights with muttons would need to match what was there before. But again, non-contributing house, not an issue. What are the rules for replacing like with like? Anybody want to tackle that one? That's a kind of it depends.
If the house had a historic leaded window, I think we would love to see it replaced with a appropriate leaded window that matches up to what it had historically. And the reason for that is, our job is to preserve history here. And so, it makes sense to us that we would try to say, well, if it's available, if you can find it, if it's, if you can locate something that would work in that frame, yeah, we'd love to see you try to do that with that leaded glass. On the other hand, if you can't find it, if it's not, commercially available, it's not, it's just, it's outrageous, then the answer is, we'll probably work with you to find some kind of an alternative that seems to work for you.
So I think it might be helpful to understand that almost all of these questions are answered in the standards. I don't, not to give you a homework assignment, but most of them are in here. Someone says, my home is built in 1958, and we have spoken to many contractors that do not want to raise, I'm assuming lift it up, and make an expanded Cape Cod. We are told to knock it down. What does this do for us as a non-contributing structure? All the houses on the block have been redone and much bigger, and most do not look historic. So if we go back to the principle that if it's non-contributing, that what you want to do with an addition, it be compatible with when the house was built, it would be not an issue at all to raise it and put an addition on that is compatible with the existing style of the house. It doesn't need to be bigger, only if you want it to be bigger and comply with zoning. We have nothing to say about that. Does that help? Well, that's another thing we can do.
That could be a reflection of what the contractors want to do and not what you want
exactly.
to do, which is not always. As John explained before, if you ever did want to knock it down, you have to meet certain criteria to do that. But it sounds like you want to improve it, right? So that's where you ought to be going.
So it would be inappropriate for us to recommend any contractors specifically, but we can give you a list of those with whom do the scale of work you're looking, just because we see so many of them. A list of 3 or 4, that we can do. Yeah, come talk to us on Tuesday morning. So Kevin, this one's for you. It almost says Kevin, but it doesn't. So you picked certain houses from the block 1144. Why was that?
1144. I went down each of the blocks, and the blocks are really actually almost perfect for the discussion we've had tonight. They tend to be a mix of contributing properties, or at least ones that appear to be contributing based on their appearance, ones that have some reproductive elements in them, and probably if you want to really talk about a house or building that has a very nice reproductive element to it. Sturdy Bank is a good one. I mean, that's a very lovely building, and it fits so nicely in the historic district, and yet it's new construction. And then I also picked up houses that are clearly not in the period of significance, meaning they were built, later, maybe in the last couple of decades, and you can start to see how the houses blend together. And that's the element of the streetscape, if you will, is do they fit well together? So if you think about a street, and they are typically a mix. They have some old historic properties. They have some relatively newer ones. We might see an application that says we want to raise one of the houses, to get above the floodplain. That's something we're just starting to see more and more of now. Does that take the house so high that it looks odd compared to everybody else's in the neighborhood? That would be one of the things we would, we'd ask ourselves. If the individual wanted to raise the house higher than the floodplain required so they could put a parking garage underneath it, we would likely say no to that, because now you're distorting the streetscape, if you will. Even if the goal of creating some parking might be admirable, given our parking in this city. So, every one of those projects is individual and different, but what we're trying to do very much is, first off, apply the standards. That's always the goal. Apply the standards, do it consistently, not set precedents, just, keep them logical and adaptable. The second is think about the streetscape. Is it a fit with the surrounding architecture and style of houses? That's how I picked the pictures. I just said each of the blocks seemed to me to represent one of the problems with planning concepts and philosophies. They all seem to have a mix of houses, and each one of them kind of demonstrated a different one of the design and planning principles: the donut, the sawtooth, that sort of thing. So that's how I did it. There's no mystery, no magic to it.
Okay. So what lawfully designates a historic property? Age, year built? Well, let's be clear. It's not designated by law as a historic property. It is designated by virtue of a property report as contributing or non-contributing. So this is a later question, so I'll just get to that. What is a non-contributing property? What is a contributing property? The first criteria for a contributing property is, was it built within the period of significance? In Cape May, currently, the period of significance is 1840 to 1940, roughly. 1940 is the front end or back end, depending on how you look at it. We are currently considering moving that 1940 up to 1948, mainly because of a major effort that was completed about a year ago. It was a 2-year effort in looking at the contributions of the African American community to our culture and place. And 1948 was, in fact, the year that federal desegregation law was passed, so it was proposed in that draft that we augment the period of significance in 1948. I also think we ought to push the back end, or front end, early end, earlier, because we have one property here in Cape May that dates from 1730. So that's the first criteria. The second is, since it has been built within that period of significance, has it been significantly altered, or beyond which its contributing character has been so, I would say, revised that it no longer holds its initial, historical significance. And that's all assessed by an architectural historian. Those are all, again, in the property reports for pretty much every property in Cape May. Again, you can get a copy of it from your address just by calling Judy, and you can find it.
We don't do that.
We don't
do that at the individual hearing or process. We work from the surveys, and they're extensive and they are ongoing. But you'll see if you read your survey that generally there is an assessment of those qualities, and the architectural historian will discuss what it is that caused them to decide that it is A or B.
Mm-hmm. How can one property be historic and another not? Well, that's the same thing. It's really contributing or non-contributing. So historic in terms of this assessment is not really an accurate term. What would make them a contributing property? Well, that's, I think, what I just defined, or what defines a non-contributing property is right up here on the screen. So this was something that was in an earlier slide. It's those 3 criteria. which assesses it as non-contributing. Again, all of the properties that we are proposing be included in the revised amended map are non-contributing. Can you or the city change a non-contributing to a contributing at any time? No. This is determined by the property reports. Any other comments about that?
No,
It's not us.
I've yet to see us take a non-contributing and change it into a contributing as a result of a survey, but usually only one way. But it's not our determination. It's a review and an assessment by an expert.
Actually, one of the most heartbreaking things in my mind, as a, somebody who loves history, is to see a contributing property lose its contributing status.
Yeah.
It is
So let's talk
just
about that, because
heartbreaking.
that's one of our roles here, folks. One of our primary roles, in fact, a key role of HPC, is to ensure that any of the contributing properties that have that status do not get reassessed as non-contributing because of some significant alteration to them. If that happens, and it happened a few years ago, there were several of them that occurred, we were then on a watch list of possibly losing our historic landmark designation. That's what we're trying to protect. So that's a much, much bigger issue with regard to contributing properties than it is non-contributing. If we start to lose contributing properties and they fall off into non-contributing, and there's several grants that are applicable because of our National Historic Landmark District status.
At least there were.
Well, there were. Well, we'll see.
We'll see.
Sort of one more comment to that. Once a house or a building has lost its contributing status, it really can't recover it. Even if at some point there are other alterations to bring it back to its original form, while we would love to see that, and we do.
And in fact, we've encouraged it.
We
I mean,
do
with
see
respect to non-contributing properties that really look like they can be aided by original materials. I mean, it certainly helps.
There are people who want to restore the house to
So
its
I
original
just want
form.
to interject a really simple principle that determines whether or not something can be done, and that is reversibility. So one of the things we don't regulate, but we encourage, is paint color. Paint color is completely reversible. If somebody near you paints their house a color you hate, you may not be able to do anything but ignore it, but you can sort of soothe yourself by saying, it's just paint. The next owner might paint a much better color. And so I think when we talk about preserving history, we're talking about preserving the qualities and the appearance that bring us back into the story of these buildings. And reversibility, something you do that can be taken back, is a key principle. So I know that it's hard to understand the contributing versus non-contributing, and we do rely on architectural historians who know a lot more about architecture than I do, and than most of
Well,
us.
than anybody except John.
But we are also looking at practical matters of maintenance, and reversibility is a key.
So I'd like to point out one other thing, and that is, and going back to Kevin's point about the maintaining of contributing structures and how hard we try to keep those from falling out of that category, one of the points I'd like to make is, in this sort of sawtooth arrangement that exists now, if one of those structures fails and falls out of line, it means danger to the structures next to it, regardless of what they are. So the uniformity of putting people in the district allows us to continue to protect the contributing structures, and it benefits the non-contributing structures.
Exactly right. And we're sitting here in 2025. The HPC is not something that stops in 2025. This goes on and on and on. And at some point in the future, maybe there will be a point where a house that's been completely restored can re-enter that, but we can't determine that today, and we have no input, no role really in that, except to encourage people to go back and bring them back to the original standards.
So there are a couple questions here about taxes. How will this change affect my taxes? Lorraine, could you address that, please?
Not at all.
No, right. That's right. Let's see. So taxes reset. There are several questions here about grandfathering, and if I'm understanding the question, I think what you're asking is, see if I can clarify what I said before. Grandfathered, I suspect, means that if you are not in the historic district now, and this is passed, you would be in the historic district. No, you would be in the historic district, but your status of non-contributing is quote-unquote grandfathered. That does not change. Nothing even affects what you do to that property or in its current condition unless you are, again, applying for some sort of improvement that affects the exterior of the property. So hopefully that's really, really clear. So nobody's going to come to you right now and say, hey, you need to change this. It only affects you, and only minimally, if you're doing repairs and maintenance, not at all, as we went through before, right? Just remember that? Nothing on the interior, nothing for ordinary maintenance and repair, and only if you are trying to change the appearance of the exterior of the property. Okay, let's see. So there's grandfathered again. So if I object to this, how do I vote? Chris, you want to address that?
You can step up to the microphone and identify yourself and say that you're against it or you're for it. But whatever HPC does with this, if they vote on it tonight or they vote on it in a future meeting, it's not going to take effect and be effective on any application for development until it goes through the planning board and they'll review it for master plan consistency. And then eventually council's going to have to adopt an ordinance on first and second reading saying this is the map. And until that happens, it's not going to have the force of law. So we're at the ground level of this process right now. And that's, the HPC wanted to be at the forefront of that by providing notice, even though notice is not even provided under the code. They wanted to get everybody involved and be able to explain and answer questions. So we're at the ground level of the process.
Yeah, the letter that you all received was not required by law. We chose to do that so that anybody who was affected could respond and come tonight to tonight's meeting. Now, this is an interesting question. How much does each person up here get paid?
I'm still looking for the first payment.
We are all volunteers, folks. I keep a pretty good record of how much time I put in, somewhere between 15 and 20 hours a week doing this stuff. It's all volunteer work. Let's see.
But just a point, John. I say that the reason we're here and the reason we're doing this is because we think it's important for the community, and we think it's important since we're pretty much all property owners. We all think protecting our history is important. So we're just being truthful with our principles, and we're just trying to do that for the city.
Will curbs and sidewalks be impacted? Yeah, that's also part of this paving bit. I only worked. Again, that's all clearly defined in the standards. But when we did paving, I kept it to just driveways. So yes, that's part of the streetscape. If you're replacing your sidewalks, in those cases, the sidewalks are permitted to be concrete. It's just not concrete slabs for driveways. And fencing, yes, we went through that. So here's how fencing is impacted. Pretty straightforward. Again, all defined in the standards. And landscaping, yes, landscaping is part of the streetscape, but generally speaking, landscaping is considered an improvement. We don't really have that much to say about it, except when it might serve to do some sort of screening function. And of course, there's another agency in Cape May that addresses tree removal. So that's the Shade Tree Commission. And they've asked us to be on the lookout for that, right?
There also is a city ordinance on invasive species. Yeah, there is a city ordinance on invasive planting materials and things like that could come up in something like this. I'm thinking the bamboo and Phragmites, I think is the other.
Yeah, we would discourage bamboo and Phragmites just because they're so invasive, really quite a big issue. All right, here's another one about grandfathered. So again, grandfathered, if it exists and you're not doing it, it's not an issue. How soon could this take effect? So this is part of that three-step process. Chris, can you walk us through that?
I couldn't give like an exact time frame, but we're talking at least a few months here to get through this process, because HPC has to vote to adopt it, send it to the planning board. Planning board has their own schedule, and it's pretty packed lately, so it's going to have to be scheduled for a meeting with them. And then there'll be at least 2 council meetings to review an ordinance. They'll have to adopt it on first reading, publication, and then council will have a public hearing. So we're going to have at least 3 public hearings. This one, planning board, and then city council. So we're talking a few months here to get through this process, and it's all going to go through in public.
Great.
No, so this is, you got personal notice of this now at the start. And if you're interested and concerned with it, you should keep track of that progress. That's why we keep reiterating the HPC's got to act, and then it's going to go to the planning board, and then to city council. So those agendas are available online on the city website. There's city agenda meetings, and like you can just search by the month, and I would just keep track of those as it goes. And, you know, if it proceeds from here, then I'm telling you, the next stop's going to be the planning board. It's not going to be council first. It'll be planning board and then council.
So what specific state best practices are not currently being followed? Oh, just a moment. Okay, right with you. Or was it specific to that? Oh, yeah, please. Can you come up to the microphone, please?
Step up to the microphone at the
Yeah. We want to be able,
dais,
for the folks
so we
watching
can all
to
hear you.
hear this.
I'm not clear on the voting process. You said we could vote. Would that be a ballot issue?
No, so
no.
HPC is going to vote on this or not?
Oh, it's just HPC?
Yeah, but they're going to vote after they hear the public's input. That's what's going to happen. You know, they have to vote to, there's no process in the code for, you know, there could be a referendum or something like that, but that's not what we're doing.
Right.
HPC's putting together this map. They're going to vote on it, but only after hearing all the feedback from the public.
And then it goes to planning, and then it goes to city council. So that's the 3-step process. So the best practices are pretty much outlined in this letter. So I pulled this letter back up again in terms of their reference to intensive level survey of historic resources from 2011 from certified local governments. There's a long list, but in short, it's those really arbitrary jagged edges on the current zoning map that you can see where I refer to them as missing teeth. We've got a couple of isolated properties, so everything in purple here, and I don't know if I can, no, I can't really do that, is currently within the historic district, so you can see that it's really confusing and not clear and not bounded by very simple lines around blocks. That's the primary issue that the State Historic Preservation Office is recommending that we rectify. Okay, and some of the blocks photographed, there's already a great variety because of lots of building in the last decade. Will appropriateness be determined only by the historic properties on the block? No. Or will new houses be evaluated also against the new recent ones? Anybody want to address that?
I'm sorry, would you just repeat it one more time?
Yeah, so the last question is a little difficult, but let me try it. Or will new houses be evaluated also against the new recent ones? You know, so many are taller, for example. Okay? It's an issue. Go ahead, Janice.
I'd like to address this because over the years, the HPC has approved you can't hear me? Okay, sorry. Over the years, the HPC has approved things that we now look at as unfortunate. We're far from perfect. If we're looking at an application for a new construction on a block where there has been 1 or 2 that exceeded the scale that we would want, we would certainly consider that. You can't help it, it's part of the streetscape now. But we wouldn't rubber stamp it. We would work with you to try to get the usefulness you're looking for in the building, but also to respect the balance of the historic properties on that streetscape. Does that make sense? I mean, this is not an exact science, and we're working hard to try to make it a dialogue where we all share a sense of stewardship for the future of this community.
I think of the streetscape as the overall picture of the street. So we're talking about not simply being based on only the historic properties, but taking the street as a whole. I mean, that's my view of it.
Okay. So there's two that I think are related here regarding the Cape May Marina. We are a commercial marina, have no streetscape. Private for, I can't read that word, might say guests and slip owners. Why are we here? Which is also seemingly related to the map is wrong and inaccurate, something about the marina. So perhaps whoever submitted this would like to come up and ask about this? Please, could you state your name?
My name is Sean Scarborough.
Hi, Sean.
I own Cape May Marina,
Yeah.
and I developed Spicer Creek.
Okay.
None of that property is in the HPC.
So can you point on the map where that is?
At the north end.
Up here? So is it up here? So you're on Yacht Avenue?
No, it's north end.
From everything from this line, this way, is not the HPC.
So 1015 already is.
No, there's a lot more than that. I mean, we can slow it down. Block 1061, 02, 01, 08, 04, 1015, 101. Every one of these individual lots we can't make out here because this was the subdivision. None of these homes, 37 single-family lots, and the marina are in the HPC.
So when you say HPC, you mean in the historic district?
Do you mean in the current historic district or as we've proposed?
In the current historic district.
Okay, so if I understand you correctly, what you're saying is that the map we're showing of the current historic district is inaccurate relative to your properties.
Correct.
Okay, I just want to understand what the
So-
point you're making.
The city manager is who created this map for us, so that would be something you would have to address with Paul for us to understand the implications.
And we'll investigate it.
Yeah, we'll check it out. Yeah.
Well, can I continue if I had the microphone?
Please.
We, as Cape May Marina, do not wish to ever be in the HPC. In addition,
So can I just interrupt for a second? HPC, you're talking about the historic district. I'm just trying to understand.
We, as Cape May Marina,
Yeah.
would never want to be in the historic district. As a member of the HOA, which is Spicer Creek, the development, as a member of that HOA, I would not want to be, or Cape May Marina, in the historic district. And I know that the vice president and president of the HOA are here tonight, too, if you wanted to hear from them. And the other question that you received there was from Donald Roseman, I believe, who is my neighbor and friend. He is just to the north of us on the map. Thank you.
So directly attached to that, also, this is from somebody from Spicer's Creek, HOA president. It says, our neighborhood already has an HOA with very restrictive covenants and an architectural review board to govern exterior improvements and betterments by homeowners and consistency. So my question would be, that architectural review board, does it comply with the standards for non-contributing buildings in the historic district?
No, it does not.
Okay. All right.
I'm going to ask a question. Is there a reason or reasons why you don't want to be part of the Cape May Historic District?
Sure, there's
Okay.
many, but I'll just try to hit on the
Enlighten us.
the top. Everything that was built in that community was done in the last 6 years. When I appeared in 2013 and purchased the property, it was in a bankruptcy situation. There were 168 boats sitting on the hard. It was a disaster. We backed off. We made less square footage, less residential square footage. We undid a condominium association. We got 287 variances through a site plan to reduce the size of the property and make it, I would say, more Cape May-like, which is beautiful. We all, I think, can agree on that in this room. But at this point, everything is brand new. None of it would be considered historic under the standards in the book, which is noble.
Your properties would all be non-contributing properties.
I don't want to have to go through the process. That's just the point. On both sides of the street, in the neighborhood, the marina itself. I'm not going to speak for the entire HOA. That's why the president's here, nor my friend and neighbor, the Rosemans, Donald Westcott and his family. But we did it. It's done. This stuff's brand new. We don't see any purpose for it from our perspective. And it is off of the main street. It is in its own little neighborhood, if you would. And I noticed, as you've worked through this and you've mentioned Sawtooth, the map's not right. It's dramatically incorrect if we're voting on anything as to what's in and now.
Well, we're not voting, but we certainly will look into the situation of
Yeah,
an incorrect
and
map, of course.
And that's why you have meetings like this. And I think the charge of the Historic Commission is great. But I just don't think for us up in that corner that's off of Lafayette, it's appropriate. That's all I would want to
Thank you.
express to the board.
I have a question for you.
Yeah.
Your covenants that are part of your architectural review
Yeah.
board, are those tied, is it a deed restriction of ownership, those covenants?
In a sense, yes. I drew them. When we delivered the property, we undid a condominium association and turned it into single-family lots, like primarily the rest of a lot of Cape May is, right?
It's happened in a few places.
Yeah, and we were seeking consistency. I think, like, for instance, we said no fences. We just didn't want to see it.
Yeah.
Oddly, it's sort of the same charge that you as a group had, albeit a lot less difficult because it's one neighborhood, one idea that we were trying to strike. And I think we did a pretty good job of it.
Are there materials restrictions in the covenant?
There's no materials restrictions that I can think of offhand, but there is an architectural committee of 3 people at a board level that are residents to keep it, in essence, looking the way it looks now.
Okay. Thank you for that input.
Okay.
Yes. Please, may I just finish? I just need 1 second. Oh, okay. Are you also from Spicer's Creek?
Yes, I'm the president of the HOA.
Oh, great.
I represent nearly 40 homeowners.
So you're John?
I'm John, yes.
All right, John Miles, yes?
Yes.
Thank you.
I would just like to add that the restrictive covenant that applies was also submitted to the city and was approved. Chris is very familiar with it because we've had some dealings before on some issues that we tried to advocate for. I will just tell you that I don't understand this to be an all or nothing proposition. If there is a carve out allowed of some of these areas, I think our neighborhood is very unique. Sean has built and developed a very unique and very nice property. And I think anyone who has an architectural eye would be very pleased with the way the neighborhood looks. We are very committed for consistency. We do take our architectural review board responsibilities very seriously. And there are a lot of restrictions already. And we think that we should be carved out because we are a very unique organization and a very unique neighborhood. And we think that an additional layer of oversight beyond what our own HOA does and what our own architectural review board would be very redundant and would be very irresponsible for us to accept. So I would say that I can't say tonight that all 37 owners have said no, but I have a pretty good sense that what we've learned tonight, I would tell you that I would represent all 37 owners as saying that we would ask to be carved out of this proposal.
Okay.
Thank you,
John, for that input. You also asked, what if my current flat roof needs to be repaired or replaced? Well, it already exists, therefore repairing it and replacing it would not require to do anything but keeping it the way it is. Yeah. I think I got to everybody's questions.
Others?
So, if anybody has further comments or questions or would like to come up and speak with us, please come up and introduce yourself and let us know what you're thinking.
Hi, my name's Kate Reed.
Hi, Kate.
I just have 2 questions, I think. Half a question also. Half a question. I can go to Shade Tree Commission when I have a tree issue. I don't have to come to you first, correct? Great. I love that. How is the application fee revenue used? Good.
Okay, what's that second question?
How is the application fee revenue used? If it doesn't pay you, what happens with it?
I have no idea.
Oh, no, that's not true. It's used for, this goes into the city fund, but it
I'm
is used for
staff.
administration
It
purposes.
pays for my position. My position is rather new. It's only 4 years old. It's a part-time position. I can assure you that I work very hard. There's a lot of processing that goes into this. Once I make sure the application is complete, often they're not complete, I have to contact you, your architect, other people. It goes to the Tuesday morning review committee. They review it. It comes back again. It needs to be processed again. It then gets placed on an agenda for final approval the following month. Where the funds go with the city, you'd have to contact them.
That's fine. Not meant for you to have to defend your position. I just was curious as to where the money goes. And then my last question is, I did miss the first 15 minutes and I do apologize, but I just want to make sure that I fully understand. Do you provide recommendations or do you provide requirements? It is a requirement. So then are there punitive measures if I were to not come to you or if I didn't follow, what you tell me to do?
Yes.
And is that laid out?
Truthfully, I think the answer is both.
Okay.
So, yes, it's requirements. It's part of the zoning code. It's a requirement. Just like if you're in the zoning, you have to get you can't build 15 feet into a 20-foot
Sure.
setback. It's a zoning requirement just like that. However, they do also provide recommendations, and that's why I think the chairman highlighted the fact that the HPC probably has a little bit of a boogeyman reputation over the years, probably well earned, right? But it had to get that to defend the historic landmark status. If you went there now, and I've seen this firsthand because I used to be on the opposite side of this table before I represented the board, and I was an applicant before. The process is a little bit more empathetic. It's a little bit more constructive towards trying to find solutions and work with applicants. So it's both. It really is. It's requirements, but they're also here and offering to meet and problem solve applications too.
Which I fully appreciate, and I like that you highlighted that it's like you've said, free design, consultation. But I just wanted to make sure that I understood it is not just recommendations.
No, and there are HPCs in this state which are not strong HPCs, and so what they function as is make recommendations which may or may not be followed by whoever the appropriate officer is. In Cape May, with a strong HPC, a certificate of appropriateness where it's applicable must be issued, or the building official will not issue his permit.
Correct. And that certificate of appropriateness is a direct reflection on compliance with these standards. So when I say recommendations, if you come to us and speak with us and tell us what it is that you're trying to do, we can help you by saying, well, we might recommend this as options to be able to be compliant with the standards so you can get your certificate of occupancy, which therefore qualifies you for a building permit.
And another point I'd like to highlight about the hearing process. We've been talking about meetings and reviews and ultimately for those projects that need a hearing, have a hearing process, and that's not always just a one-step thing, because we've had, our hearing process is such where you can come in front of us and you can apply for a final approval, and if things go well, you get that final approval. Sometimes you have to go other places, like to the zoning board, planning board. You still can come in front of the HPC, and we have a process called a conceptual approval. And in that conceptual approval, what you submit is reviewed, it's passed upon, and recommendations can be made with respect to what happens when you come back for final. So it's really a kind of a process where you can engage with us at varying levels all the time, which it consists of recommendations, but then requirements.
Sure. And in that kind of instance that you were just speaking of, is that a one-time application fee if you're talking about the same project
Yes.
throughout the process?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And then is there like a clear list of punitive measures if someone were to not follow? I'm not planning to.
Well,
You don't
Chris
need
can
to
tell
look
you what
me up,
happens when you
but-
violate the law, but yes.
There's standard fines and penalties, in.
Is it like on the website?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Article 3 has that's-
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Okay,
I appreciate it.
I just wanted to add, too, we also have an HPC compliance officer who, when we approve something, he'll check to see that all the blocks are checked to what we approved.
Sure.
Or if someone tries to do something without coming before us if necessary.
Yep, okay.
I will say, too, about that, the first reaction from an HPC compliance officer or any code enforcement officer is usually not to, like, send some fine letter and, like, a summons. Usually it starts with a conversation with the property owner. Hey, I've identified a problem, and looking for a path toward compliance. That's been my experience since I've been here.
Cool.
Now, obviously, there's exceptions to that when it's egregious, but usually, if it's, depending on the nature of the violation, usually they're looking for compliance first rather than like, hey, let's get the biggest fine ever. So just wanted to point that out, too.
No, that's helpful. Thank you, I appreciate it.
Please.
Just one more question.
Again, can you state your name, please?
Bob White,
Thank you.
what is the impact on an empty lot?
What?
With
I'm
this
not quite-
non-contributing historic district?
Oh, so if there's an empty lot in the historic district and somebody wants to build something on it, it would need to comply with the non-contributing standards,
Okay.
pretty much as I outlined tonight, and they're all pretty clearly delineated in this book.
So you'd have to go before HPC
It would,
also?
yeah, comprises.
So a lot that was not in the district, when it becomes part of the district, you have to go through the HPC, and it is
Right.
non-contributing?
Correct.
Any property that is in the historic district that happens to be vacant, if somebody wants to construct something on it, it would be considered new construction, non-contributing, because it doesn't fall within the period of significance. Therefore, it comes to us for review, and that would go to full commission.
Gotcha, thank you.
My name is Eric Barikian.
I'm sorry, could you repeat that?
Eric Barikian. Can you hear me?
Thank you.
Resident and homeowner of 1304 Washington Street. Before I get into my objection, I just had a question for clarification about the map. You stated that Mr. Dietrich made the map, but then you also stated that this gentleman drove around to pick out houses.
Oh, no. So we can explain that. So,
Absolutely.
yeah.
I'd love to hear
So the map, the original map looked like this, right? So when we, as the Historic Preservation Commission recommended new boundaries, we delineated those in a series of sessions as what would likely be our recommendation. Paul, who's the city manager, took that and created this map from that to identify which properties are currently not included in the historic district. Basically, it's a crosswalk between the last map and the proposed boundaries. So what you can see here is what Kevin did, and I'll let him describe that. He identified where on this map were some blocks that would be affected by this that might be worth talking about tonight.
Yeah, I just picked ones fairly
Yeah.
randomly and then chose some of the houses on the block just because I thought they illustrated some of the planning principles.
Did you
and
look at the block lines at all to decide which houses should
Not
be included, or you just picked and choose the houses?
I just went to that part of the street and picked ones that I thought illustrated
Didn't
some.
pull any reports to see
No,
what the
but-
lot
but-
lines were previously?
Not at all.
But I think we have to clarify here, it wasn't him going around and decided what was going to be included.
Yeah.
Right.
He
I
just
didn't-
took
I didn't-
photos for illustration for this meeting
Yeah,
tonight.
I mean, Kevin was our unofficial photographer.
Those are
just to-
purely
just-
context photos.
Just to
I
have
didn't-
discussions.
I didn't
Yeah.
pick houses for inclusion in the map in any
Right.
way, shape, or
Yeah.
form. All I did was simply took the map, which said that there's some properties that are going to be included in the new historic district, and just picked some of the houses at random that were on that block to say, these are illustrations of the mix of houses that are there. Some
Got
are-
it. So Mr. Dietrich was the one who created the map.
Yeah,
He
I-
left out
nothing to
certain
do with-
homes, that was my confusion, but he left the meeting, so I guess I can't.
Yeah.
Nothing to do with.
No problem.
what's in
I
it.
appreciate it. I appreciate the clarification. Once again, I'm Eric Barikian. I'm the homeowner of the property located at 1304 Washington Street, here to formally object the proposed inclusion of my home in the expanded Historic Preservation District. Based on the most recent historic property surveys and visual assessments, this home has undergone substantial alterations, including modern siding, replacement windows, roof alterations, and multiple additions that have removed any architectural elements relevant to the district's character. This home was originally 10 lots, lining from Washington Street, connecting the entire block of East Street to Massachusetts before being subdivided. Some homes were not included on the list, which I don't understand. This home was once front-facing East Street before these alterations and additions were added after the sale nearly 20 years ago. This home was purchased outside the HPC map to avoid being contributing or non-contributing property. As such, the home does not contribute to the historical or architectural significance of the surrounding district and should not be subject to the regulatory purview of the HPC. Inclusion of this property would impose unnecessary limitations on its use and maintenance without serving the city's preservation goals. Additionally, my sister and I came before the planning board on May 14, 2024. At this meeting, I was promised by a member of the board someone would reach out to me regarding our objection to our home being added in the district map. A year has gone by. I have not heard a response. At the meeting, we presented our case, including the lack of communication from the HPC, which resulted in the May 20th, 2025 letter being sent out. I have sent emails to multiple members of the HPC requesting clarification or to simply have a conversation with no response. I have lived in this town my entire life. I vote in the city, I support local businesses, and my family has devoted over 50 years of service combined, half of that being in this exact building. If the HPC does not want to communicate with the public outside of this forum, that's fine. Or at the Tuesday morning meeting, which you can't attend if you have a job. If the HPC does not want to communicate with the public outside of this forum, that's fine. I will take time away from my job that pays the increasing cost to live in this town, time away from my 6-month-old daughter and wonderful wife to stand in front of you tonight. In doing so, I respectfully request that the HPC reconsider the inclusion of this property in any future historic boundary expansions or regulatory frameworks. I would appreciate my home being excluded from the list of properties being presented to the planning board, and I'm willing to provide further documentation or appear at public hearing to present supportive evidence. But it is my strong opinion that the HPC decide tonight to remove my home from the list so this already drawn-out process can come to an end. I also want to address a question that I think the HPC might have. Why should one home be excluded from the plan? I'll quote the attorney, Mr. Gillen Schwartz, at last week's city council meeting. Just because you did it there doesn't mean you need to do it here. Every building should be a case-by-case basis based on facts and circumstances. It is a unique location that you must take into consideration rather than just filling in gaps on a street. Thank you.
So you said your name was Kevin or Eric? I'm sorry.
Eric.
Eric. So Eric, I invite you to send me an email anytime.
I already have.
I did not receive it.
I can pull the records and have it, we can bring it up at the planning board.
Oh, so
You're not confusing us with
hold
the
on,
planning
let
board.
me finish this. Yeah. So, if I missed your email, I apologize. I respond to every single email I get. Anything to do with HPC. So if somehow I didn't get it, I invite you to please send it to me again. I would love to have a conversation with you about this. Do you have my personal email address?
Yes, I sent it to you, and we can pull the records that it was sent to you.
Well, I didn't receive it.
We
So
can have an audit.
yeah, how long ago was that? Just
Last week. Right
Wow.
before the letter was sent. And I need clarification on why the letters were sent, because I came in front of the planning board, and that's why the letter was sent. It seems like that was not addressed whatsoever.
No. The reason why the letters were sent was we wanted to make sure that anybody who would be affected by this particular proposal would have clear knowledge about this meeting, and to be able to come and like you just did, offer your comments so that we could take those into consideration before we make any recommendation.
That was not the case when I came to the planning board last year. I was told that no letters needed to be sent. And the reason it was sent was because I came in front of the planning board and presented the lack of communication from the HPC.
Well, if that's the case, I'm glad you did that. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it wasn't out of the kindness of your heart. It was out of somebody that was a concerned citizen.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
I just addressed that you were going to add us.
I really disagree with that to the extent that I think you've seen that we here are open to having communication made to us at any time. Now, maybe you sent something to John and John didn't receive it, but any of us can be approached that way. We're all listed. We're all accessible. We all communicate, and we've tried to increase that communication with the public. We're doing this not because we're prodded by the planning board. We're doing this because we think this is the right way to redefine the historic district. And that means all the properties that and individual properties may deserve some consideration. But it isn't that this board, this commission, isn't responsive. We hold regular meetings, we have public attendance, we have public input. So we're not some closed place that meets once or twice a month or a week without people being able to give us input.
So I'd like to take this offline so you and I can have a conversation. You can call me, send me an email, I'll be happy to respond.
I would
So-
love to have this voted on tonight as well, my objection that I have. I would love to have a response from.
Well, it's unlikely we're going to vote on anything tonight. We're just simply soliciting input so that we can deliberate and give it. I think there's also a couple of issues where there's some errors on the map. Because of those errors on the map, I think it would be inappropriate for us to make any recommendation until we're absolutely sure that those maps are accurate. So we're unlikely going to vote on anything tonight.
All right, thank you for your time.
Thank you. Any other comments? Yes. I'm sorry, what's your name, please?
Rachel
Rachel.
Kaiser. Rachel Kaiser.
Thank you, Rachel.
We purchased our home 13 years ago, and we came down here because we liked the whole aspect of Cape May, knowing that eventually we wanted to do something to our home. And we purchased the home due to the fact that it wasn't in the historic districts, knowing that we wanted to maybe get it a little bit more up to scale, a little bit bigger, because it's a home that we want to eventually come down and live here full time once my husband retires. But the stipulations with the historic district is going to impinge a lot more stuff on us, because our block in itself has gone and blown up more than anything. And I think my home is probably, mine and two others are probably the smallest homes on the block. I mean, I have my neighbor next door to me that he actually looks into my bedroom from his kitchen. So for like that sake, we've talked to a lot of contractors, and they pretty much tell us that we can't raise it because we're a foot below sea level, and then add on to it because of zoning and because of the footprint of our home. So I would prefer not to it be in the historic
Yeah.
district, but I'm not opposed to being in it either. I would like to know a lot more information.
So here's what's really interesting, because zoning, HPC does not address zoning issues like floor area ratio and lot coverage and setbacks. However, there are significant FEMA grants available for raising homes that are in the floodplain.
Right. We've looked into that.
Yeah,
Like down the street, which that home would be considered, they just built a monstrosity of a home.
Yeah.
And there is no way that those variances, I don't even know how they got passed. Their property is so close to the next property's garage, and I couldn't even put a deck on the back of with it being the whole width of our house. They wanted us to stop in the center of a window, so we just said, forget it.
So Rachel, please come speak with us on Tuesday morning when you have a chance, and we can figure out what might work for you.
Okay, that's great. I would really appreciate that. What time on Tuesday mornings?
So we meet from, I think the appointments are from, they're half an hour, 9, 9:30, 10, or 10:30.
Okay.
We convene at 9 o'clock and get a few business things done, and we're usually here every week from about 9 till noon.
Okay. All
As
right.
volunteers.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome. Hi.
Hi.
What's your name?
Denise Middleton. Denise Middleton. Sorry.
You had a bunch of questions. They were good.
Thank you. I just have one question. So I'm a non-contributing. I'm not in the historic district right now, but I have vinyl siding on my house. I mean, it was redone in the year 2000. Okay? So if I want to change the color of my house, can I still do vinyl siding?
So I think so one of the things about these standards, which is really important, is if you try and write a standard that is going to apply to every condition in every situation for all time, you will fail. So there is intentionally a little bit of ambiguity in these that allows us to make discerning assessments based upon specific individual conditions, which is why Chris said, as this gentleman just pointed out, that every property is entirely unique and therefore needs to be assessed on its own merits. So again, what I would do, I would recommend that you come before us and suggest what it is that you're seeking to do, and that way we can see exactly what the conditions and context and streetscape and all that is, and we can make an assessment and a recommendation. Notice, however, I need to say this, that the three of us who are on the subcommittee, we are only 3 votes, and there are 7 commissioners, so we can't guarantee that if you want to bring it forward to the full commission that you'll get the 4 votes required. But we also have the ability, if it's a minor application, which that would be if you're simply replacing the siding, we can make that assessment at the subcommittee level. So come talk to us.
So me, like Rachel, I bought my house where I bought it on Sewell Avenue. In fact, picture of my house was up there. But, I mean, I'm 2 houses from not being in your line.
Yeah.
You know, so, I mean, we bought there because we bought in 1987. So we've been here a long time. So, I mean, I don't want to be in the historic district if I'm not, because I'm, you know, looking to pass this down to my children, and I don't want them to have any, I mean, I figure I got a few years left, but my kids will have to probably redo something to the house.
Are you contemplating replacing the siding in the near future?
No, I'm not, but my kids might be when, you know, 20 years down the road, they're not ever planning on getting rid of the house either. So, you know, like, I don't want to tie them up.
Yeah, so what's really interesting about that, and this is one of the things that we can talk about, there's expertise on that committee, that you may actually find that in the long term, the cost-benefit analysis of vinyl may not be, and I can't say that for sure, I would need to see the conditions, that there may be other materials that are cost comparative that you actually might find more aesthetically pleasing, more beneficial, and have a life cycle cost analysis that would be better than vinyl.
I don't want to have to paint, though. I mean, one of the
Understood.
big,
Yep.
you know,
Yep.
like that was one of the
Yep.
things we were glad we weren't in the historic districts, because we don't want to have to paint.
That's what
it.
life cycle cost analysis means, is that what you need to do to maintain it.
Right.
Over its full life, cradle to grave. So
Okay.
we'll have this chat. I'd love to talk about alternatives.
Okay.
Yep.
All right, great. Thank you.
Sure. Anyone else? We are 5 minutes past 6. I think we're beyond the allotted time, but if anybody has a burning issue that you really would like to talk about, I invite you to come up and please share your thoughts.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to say something.
Please be.
I would like to say, as we left, do we get paid? No, of course we do not. But we are all here for the same reason, and that is for love of the city and for it to keep in now its golden age. Cape May had a golden age before, and around the turn of the century, right after that, then the whole city fell into disrepair. How do I know? I was raised here. And in the 1950s, the 1960s, the whole place was blight. Washington Street, you'd go to the mall, to the economic district, that was awful. Walk down Washington Street, every house was in disrepair. We had wonderful people who worked very hard to restore the business district, and then the preservationists, and then we had the National Historic Landmark. And that is very important to us. And we are the caretakers who care about this city and want it to go on. And the most important thing about the National Historic Landmark status is, first of all, it benefits every single one of you, because your homes have a higher value because of it. And secondly, it keeps us the thriving town that we are and keeps us experiencing this golden age. We are simply caretakers. We are trying to embellish upon the work and the good people and what they did that came before us. So we thank you all very much for being here and sharing your concern one way or another. I'd like to thank the chairman for his wonderful job, and thank you for coming.
So In conclusion, folks, thank you all for being here. I would like to just close this by saying we're not going to take any vote tonight. I think that what we heard requires us some due deliberation and a little more consideration. And I will consider all comments, and I would suggest that it's not unlikely that there will be some adjustments, but we'll definitely schedule, well, not definitely, I'd say it's highly likely that we'll schedule another session after we do a little bit further deliberation so that you'll all hear about it, all legal notice, et cetera, will be published, and would invite you to come back. So this is something that I don't think we can vote on tonight.
Right.
I think based on what we heard and a couple of issues with the map.
Totally agree.
I don't think we can.
You ready for a motion for adjournment?
So I am ready for a motion.
All right, I move to adjourn the meeting.
Any second?
Second.